Hi, students. This video is just to say a little bit more about things you should be noticing or thinking about as you read the first 50 pages of Frankenstein. If you notice and think about these things as you read, it will help you in the discussions, it will help you in class assignments, it will help you see how Frankenstein fits into our larger exploration of the human struggle in this class. So we might be starting off with some repeats of slides you looked at in the other video, the introduction to the Romantic period. This slide basically shows some of the key themes that we're going to be really looking into as we read Frankenstein. The theme of adventure, travel, boats. Remember that in the Romantic period, nature was super important. People believed that nature allowed us to get in touch with our feelings and accomplish goals and kind of informed our thinking and our perspective in the world. And so that nature was very important. We're going to see a lot of stuff about education and education gone wrong. So in the Age of Enlightenment, education was just seen as this absolute good, that knowledge was power. The more knowledge we could get, the more we applied reason, the better our lives would be. In the Romantic period, after the violence of the French Revolution, people sort of said, well, I don't know. Could knowledge be used for bad? I mean, the ultimate example in the 20th century, of course, was the invention of the atomic bomb, right? Great technological advancement, but is it really great? Is knowledge always a good thing? Is technology always a good thing? So those questions are really starting to be asked in the Romantic period, and Frankenstein was one of the first great works of art that really explored that question. So education, family, especially parenting, there are a lot of absent and dead parents in Frankenstein. There's a big theme of friendship, the importance of friendship to balance us out, companionship. There's a lot of doubling, mirroring of characters who end up doing the same thing, having the same thing happen to them. So we'll talk about that. I also want you to notice as you read the narrative structure. It's kind of a surprising structure, especially if you've ever seen a movie of Frankenstein. It doesn't start with the doctor and his creature. It starts with this guy, Robert Walton, and his letters to his sister. That's a frame for the book. So it's it sort of functions as a frame around the rest of the story. So one thing we might be thinking about is, what's the point of that? Who speaks first in the book and who speaks last? So as I said, friendship is a really important theme in this novel. When Robert Walton is writing to his sister Margaret, he says, I have no friend, Margaret. When I am glowing with the enthusiasm of success, there will be none to participate in my joy. If I am assailed by disappointment, no one will endeavor to sustain me in dejection. I desire the company of a man who could sympathize with me, whose eyes would reply to mine. You may deem me a romantic, dear sister. Remember, in this period, when they say romantic, they're not talking about, sexual love. They're talking about, you may deem me a romantic, as somebody very emotional. You may see me as very emotional, dear sister, but I feel bitterly the want of a friend. I have no one near me, gentle yet courageous, possessed of a cultivated as well of a capacious mind, whose tastes are like my own, to approve and amend my plans. So he has this idea that a friend would kind of balance him out and give him advice and approve of what he's doing or suggest changes to what he's doing. And a colleague of mine said, it reminds her of these guys in Toy Story. I'm going to forget now, Buzz and Woody. The way they complement each other. That's what Walton wants. We talked about mirroring. There are a lot of patterns of friendship in Frankenstein. Frankenstein's dad married his mom because his mom was the daughter of a friend of Frankenstein's dad who had lost all his money. So Frankenstein's dad sort of saves his friend's daughter by marrying her. There's a cousin that's taken in. There's another friend, Henry Clerval. I'm trying to remember Frankenstein's best friend, Clerval. All of these friends have a really important role in this novel. We also get this hint of Frankenstein kind of not being the most steady student. He's like reading a lot of bad science and not really being skeptical about it. So again, there's this suggestion of knowledge kind of going off the rails, or science going off the rails, not being balanced with something else. There's a line on lines on pages 27 and 28. Frankenstein is saying that he was reading some kind of bad scientists and he didn't know it, and he kind of wishes his dad had set him straight. He said, his dad says to him about the science he's reading that it's kind of trash. And Frankenstein said, if instead of this remark, my father had taken the pains to explain to me that the principles of Agrippa had been entirely exploded. So this is this scientific idea that had been disproven, and that a modern system of science had been introduced which possessed much greater powers than the ancient, because the powers of the latter were chimerical. Chimerical means like fake, not true, while those of the former were real and practical. My dad had just told me this science wasn't good. Under such circumstances, I should certainly have thrown Agrippa aside, and with my imagination warmed as it was, should probably have applied myself to the more rational theory of chemistry which resulted from modern discoveries. It is even possible that the train of my ideas, and interesting that he uses the word train, we're talking, I mentioned in the first video this week that the train was sort of seen as this dangerous, unpredictable new piece of technology that was often causing deaths when it ran off the rail, running down rabbits, things like that. That the train of my ideas would never have received the fatal impulse that led to my ruin. So there's this sense that some of Frankenstein's education was poor and he wasn't advised well, and he kind of blames it on his dad. And then another thing to notice is, while Frankenstein is a romantic Gothic novel, it's not necessarily supporting a romantic worldview. So one way to think about Mary Shelley, she was the daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft, and her parents were kind of anarchists. They were super liberal. She had sort of hippie parents, and she sort of reacted to that. And her view of education in this book might be a little bit more conservative, might be like, no, not just any education is okay. We need to be careful how we educate. It's a big responsibility to educate. And if your study is taking you away from humanity, you need to look at that, like the morality. So enough to build an atomic bomb, but should you build an atomic bomb? So this is how it's put in the novel. A human being in perfection ought always to preserve a calm and peaceful mind, and never to allow passion or a transitory desire to disturb his tranquility. I do not think that the pursuit of knowledge is an exception to this rule. If the study to which you apply yourself has a tendency to weaken your affections, has a tendency to separate you from others and from important connections like friendships, and to destroy your taste for those simple pleasures in which no alloy can possibly mix, So if it takes you away from simple pleasures like human connection, love of nature, then that study is certainly unlawful. That is to say, not benefiting the human mind. If this rule were always observed, if no man allowed any pursuit whatsoever to interfere with the tranquility of his domestic affections, Greece had not been enslaved, Caesar would have spared his country, America would have been discovered more gradually, and the empires of Mexico and Peru had not been destroyed. So she's kind of suggesting, be careful how you educate yourself. Be skeptical of this knowledge. Be wary of knowledge without, human connection. One thing to look at too as you read, how do technology and science shape Frankenstein's choices? I'm gonna just kind of leave that with you for right now. I'm not gonna say more about it. How is technology relevant to Frankenstein's development as a young man? This is all stuff we'll talk about more. There's, again, a lot of mirroring and opposites, nature and the natural world, and science, technology, the city. You might think about, how does the novel connect to ideas from Descartes and Kant we discussed in module 1? Do you agree with Descartes' assertion, I think, therefore I am, or are there other things besides thinking that make us human? Should animals and machines that can think be treated like humans? Is it true that everybody knows what is right or wrong, not because we've learned it, because it is born in the mind, as is attributed to Kant? These are all things to think about. Okay, I think we're jumping ahead a little bit now, and we'll talk about the creature's birth scene next week, but hopefully this gives you some ideas of things to look for as you keep reading. All right, let me know if you have any questions.